you're watching Gearz, brought to you by Holly Performance Products. Fuel your passion. And Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals.
You know, there was a time where picking up an old car truck and hot rodding it to make it faster was the dream of every gearhead across the nation. And over the years, we've seen the rise of street rods and muscle cars and sports cars and cruisers, and they're all cool, but they're not the same as that wild, rambunctious, in-your-face hot rod that started the whole thing. And there's nothing more exciting than driving that kind of car or truck. So we're building a hot rod with the hopes that you'll get out and build one too. Now, there's a lot of opinions out there about what constitutes a real hot rod. But some of the things that everybody can agree on is it's got to have a hot, high-performance engine, it's got to sound good, and it's got to have a great stance. And most people prefer to do it with a 30s or 40s era vehicle. The good news is those sort of vehicles are affordable now. The bad news is the way you find them is a lot different than it was back in the day. Check it out. This is a 1940 Chevy business coupe, so it is the perfect hot rod starting point. And this is typical of the way that you're going to find cars out there today. As you can see, the drivetrain is long gone. And so are the seats. Matter of fact, as you can see, the interior and the trunk are full of all kinds of parts and junk that have never been installed. So this is a stalled project that's been passed around from owner to owner for decades. So what the heck do you do with something like this? Well, let's take a look at what we got here. Now, as you can see, we have an aftermarket front suspension here. And even though these parts are brand new, at this point, they're over 20 years old. So there's a good chance that a lot of them are obsolete. And we have kind of a strange combination of parts here, too. Take a look. We have a chassis engineering cross member. Then we have Height's upper and lower control arms. We have no idea whose spindles those are. Then we have OEM brakes that are old and rusty. And we have coil springs, but we have no idea what the specs are on these. Matter of fact, we don't have any paperwork for any of this. All of that's long gone. So we really don't have any idea what we got here. Now, in the past, you had two choices. You could try to make all this stuff work, or you could sell it, buy new parts, and then go to work on your frame and chassis. Or now there is a third option. You can buy a brand new frame and chassis. Take a look. Fat Man Fabrications has been building front and rear suspension components for decades and is one of the driving forces behind the street rod movement. So it was only natural that they be one of the first companies to offer a complete replacement frame for vintage cars and trucks.
If we build something that's specific to a certain model, and that's going to enable that customer to then take that system, cut off the existing frame, replace all of that, with something that's going to fit that car, not a universal deal, that car, that's going to make a lot more sense to people and make their lives a lot easier. We don't build anything universal on our line. Our attitude is universal means it doesn't fit anything, okay? And it's got to fit the vehicle. We don't want to have a customer basically take a product that we're building and have to re-engineer it.
The typical build starts with 2x4, 120 wall mandrel bent steel tubing that is laid out in a jig for perfect alignment and accuracy to fit your body. Every factory bend and contour is accounted for, as well as mounts for bumpers, radiator, body, and gas tank. So everything will literally bolt in place on the new frame.
Our philosophy is we want to try and make this as easy as process for the customer as possible. So most of our frames are designed around the original rail shape, the profiling and everything. So there's a minimal, if any, amount of modifications to the factory floorboards, the trunks, or anything like that, so it does truly become something a lot more simplified. A lot of these frames, we'll use the stock body mounts. We don't want you to have to go out and get anything exotic to do this with.
The next step is to dial in the suspension and extras for your particular build. And to get the nose down and give us the rake that we wanted, we are utilizing Fat Man's independent front suspension that features new tubular control arms, spindles, sway bar, and rack and pinion steering. To make this suspension perform like it should, we added some RideTech HQ coilovers so we can dial in the suspension in the way we're going to use the car. The brakes are another thing you need to consider at this point, and for those, we went to Willwood and got these 11-inch disc brakes with drilled and slotted rotors and black calipers to bring this thing to a stop. Now, one of the benefits of having a new frame built like this is that Fat Mans will go ahead and plumb your brakes and lay out the pedal assemblies based on the way that you're setting up the car. And since real hot rods have 3 pedals, the clutch and brake assemblies were added to the frame. Now, of course, this will require for you to fabricate an access panel in your floor once the body's on, but it's much cleaner than putting it on the firewall. The rear suspension is a place where you've got a lot of options, and Fat Mans will put in pretty much whatever you want. But we needed something strong enough to handle over 500 horsepower in a stick. So we had them add a RideTech triangulated 4-bar that features big, heavy-duty bars. And we also added a Pro Street style rear sway bar because hot rods don't just go in straight lines anymore. They need to be able to handle too. So we set the suspension up accordingly. And that means adding more coilovers and rear disc brakes to match what we did on the front. Now, one other option that Fat Man offers on a custom frame like this is that they will weld in your motor mounts and transmission mounts based on the engine and drivetrain that you're going to be using, taking into consideration the firewall, the radiator, all that important stuff. Now, this is a great option to have because then when you take delivery of your frame, you're ready to start bolting stuff together just like we've been doing, and you know it's going to fit.
In a world of economic uncertainty, there will always be a need for quality tools and people who can use them. That's why becoming a Cornwell tool dealer is one of the best career moves you can make. With routes available all across the nation, it's a great way to be your own boss, supply high-quality tools to professionals, and make some real money. If you're tired of working for someone else, have the drive to succeed, and want a career that can be successful no matter what happens on Wall Street, there's a Cornwell tool truck with your name on the side.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz and our Hot Rod 40 Chevy Coupe project, where the focus today is laying out a solid foundation in the form of a frame and a chassis. And instead of using this old, nasty, rusty, 80-year-old original frame, we're going to toss that and replace it with a brand new frame from Fat Man Fabrications. Now, we've already showed you how they lay these things out, how they do the frame rails. We've put together the front and rear suspensions, but what we haven't talked about is that big elephant right there in the center, the Winner's Quick Change rear end. So let's dig into that thing. Now, the Winner's Quick Change has been around since the 50s, and it's pretty much a staple of the racing and hot rod world. But why? How does it work? Well, it's pretty simple. Take a look. The drive shaft rotates a lower shaft that runs through the bottom of the housing, comes out here. As you can see, it is then connected to an upper shaft through a series of gears, and then this upper shaft goes back into the housing, turns the ring gear, and subsequently turns your rear tires. Now, with the small gear on top, this rear end is actually set up now with a 350 gear. Perfect for running down the highway, getting good gas mileage, that kind of thing. But if you just swap these gears, put the big one on top and the small one on the bottom, you have just changed the rear end to a 484 gear. Perfect for drag racing or stoplight to stoplight. It's that quick. Check out how they build these things. The center section is assembled first, and the bearings and backlash is set so everything is operating in spec. Then, instead of bolting the center section in a housing like a conventional rear end, the center section becomes part of the housing as the side tubes are then bolted in place in the width and configuration that they were ordered in. A special jig allows the rear end to be moved and locked in place during assembly. This three-piece design is one of the unique characteristics of the quick change rear end. And once it's all assembled, the axle is tagged and set aside to be shipped out. So, as you can see, the versatility of a quick change makes it perfect for a street and strip car, a drifter, an autocrosser, heck, anything where you need to change your axle ratios quickly. And these things are strong. This particular rear end, the Champ, is rated at over 1,000 horsepower. However, if your horsepower goes above that, or you're running big, wide, sticky slicks on a drag car, or big, knobby meats on an off-road vehicle, quick change is probably not the right choice. They just weren't set up to handle those kind of shock loads. So keep that in mind when you're laying out your project. Okay, the next thing to lay out is the fuel tank. Now, I know some of you are thinking, what? The fuel tank now, really? Yeah, now. Because the fuel tank is one of the foundational aspects of a project. You gotta have one. So, deciding where it's gonna go is important so you can build the rest of the vehicle around it. For example, the original fuel tank was mounted back here in this box underneath this piece of plywood. And you can get a replacement tank if you want to keep it here. The problem is, we want to put a back seat in here. So all of this needs to be changed. So that isn't going to work for us. Option number 2 is this new frame has tabs built right in to mount a tank back here. The problem is, that winter's quick change is right in the way. So that's going to be a problem for a tank back here. The third choice, as you can see, we got a lot of room here in the forward area of this trunk. And tanks not only builds direct bolt-in reproduction tanks, but they also have a whole bunch of universal tanks, which would be perfect in that trunk because you could stuff one into that forward area and then bring your filler neck out here or here, or here, pretty much wherever you'd want to put it. And of the three, this is probably our best choice. But no matter which way we go, as you can see, there is some thought and planning into putting a fuel tank into your project. That's why you want to do it now, because where you put this is going to dictate how you do your body work, how you lay out your interior, your trunk, or your chassis.
The #1 EFI conversion just got better. With 14 new features, all new electronics, and a complete ecosystem with display options, fuel systems, even transmission control, you can't go wrong with Sniper 2 EFI. To learn more about converting your engine to EFI, visit us at Holley.com.
You know, there's an old saying that it only takes one person to completely change the course of history. And I'm sure we can all think of somebody famous that's done that. But the reality is, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that have helped build this automotive world in our culture. This is a story about one of those people. Most people know that hot rodding and rock and roll started about the same time in the 50s. But even before that, having a radio in a car was important to set the proper mood when you were out cruising or on that special date. But early car stereos, man, they left a lot to be desired in the sound department. Even when stereo came out, it didn't have the same sound or feel of what people were hearing at live concerts. Enter Steve Irby. In 1973, Steve was a professional musician and an audio aficionado, and he had some money.
I had about $12,000 that I had inherited from my grandparents. It seemed to make sense to use it to start a business.
So, with the help of a friend, they began hand-building professional concert speaker systems in a rundown building that they rented for $75 a month. And it was a beat-up, leaky old building with no electric, no heat, but it laid the groundwork for what was to come.
In 1980, a friend of mine contacted me and said that he had started a music store. I designed a speaker that fit just in the little wedge shape behind the seat in a single cab pickup truck and sent it over to him. And he called me back a few days later and, you know, the guys love this speaker. We need more. You know what they call it? And I go, no, what do they call it? And he goes, well, they call it the ass kicker.
When I built the first kicker, actually, I thought this is all I'll ever do in car audio. It was just, I built it for a friend. It was kind of a sideline. I thought this is probably the only car audio product I'll ever make. and never really had any vision for going any further with it. But that was just the beginning.
Of course, the first customers for the kicker box were the truck crowd, because the box was made to fit right behind the seat and blast that bass right up your spine. But it wasn't long before the car crowd started asking for a special box as well, and that resulted in the Kicker 2. But there was something else going on in the car audio world that was outside the box, literally.
We went to a car stereo contest down in Dallas, and I remember people were building their own enclosures using, a lot of them were home stereo subwoofers. So for me, it was kind of an eye-opener that people are wanting even more yet than what we thought was sounding really good and was loud. And that was kind of the impetus for deciding to offer a line of separate speakers that people could build their own enclosure for. And we called them kicker separates because they were separate from the enclosure. It was just the raw speaker.
But Kicker didn't stop there. The innovations just kept coming. In a quest to put more speakers in an enclosed space, they developed the solo barrack speaker that basically put two speakers in the place of one to up the volume in the bass. There was also the crazy square L7 speaker that allowed you to utilize every square inch of space in your rig to mount speakers. And to power all those speakers, they came out with the mighty Warhorse amp that would allow you to put together a system that would run as many speakers as your imagination and your budget would allow. This led to a boom in car audio enthusiasm and gave way to a whole new event at car shows, the sound competition. Now this is where guys would build massive walls of speakers in their vehicles and then uncork them in front of judges and an enthusiastic crowd. Yeah, it seemed like the whole world had gone audio crazy. And now, on their 50th anniversary, the Kicker footprint is massive, with over 200 employees, over 1,000 dealers in the U.S., and over 2,000 dealers worldwide in over 50 countries. But in spite of all that, the Kicker goal remains the same as when they started: to kick down the walls of how people approach car audio and deliver the best sound experience possible. Well, they didn't just kick those walls down, they blew the doors off too.
A successful automotive project takes planning and organization, but instead of using an old tablet or notebook, there's the Gearz Deluxe Project Planning Book. This was designed to help you lay out a project, the parts, the tools, costs, and keep it organized with colored tabs, a pouch for receipts, and even a place to attach photos. If you decide to sell the vehicle, it serves as a complete history of what's been done. If you have a project or plan on starting one, the Gearz Project Planning Book is the best way to lay it out and make it happen. Can't get enough Gearz? Make sure to check out the Tales of a Gearhead podcast, where Stacey brings a lifetime of automotive knowledge, friendships, and expertise to the listener. Also, check out our social media channels for updates and videos of Gearz projects, as well as special contests, giveaways, and events. If you have a vehicle you want to enter into What Are You Working On?, go to staceydavid.com and submit it. There's also the online store and tons of other Gearhead information that will encourage you to get out there, build something, and go drive it. And now, Parts Bin.
You know, it's a fact of automotive life that eventually, if you work on cars long enough, you're going to round off the head of a bolt and then be faced with a dilemma on how to get that bolt out of there. And instead of reaching for vice grips or pipe wrenches or something even crazier, check out these Reaper bolt extractors from Cornwell. Now, I know these look like sockets, but they're not. When you look inside, you're going to see a reverse tapered flute design that grabs hold of whatever's left of the head of that bolt and helps you remove it. And the harder you pull on it, the tighter it's going to grip. So this will make quick work of buggered up hardware and also things like carriage bolts and 12-point and Allen head hardware, screws. It'll pull out header studs and threaded rod. It'll even pull out those little pesky grease zerks that are so hard to get out of there. So if you're tired of messing with old beat up hardware, solve the problem with the Reaper bolt extractor from Cornwell.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On is from Kirk, and he is from Texas. Hello, Texas. And his project is a 1923 T-Bucket. Now, he calls this the Deathbed Promise, and here's why. His father-in-law started this project 20 years ago, drove the car with his wife to Speedway Motors in Nebraska to pick up some parts, and then shortly after that got pancreatic cancer and died. But on his deathbed, he made Kirk promise that he would finish out the T-Bucket. The only problem is Kirk didn't own the T-Bucket, so it's kind of hard to make that promise happen. Fortunately, many years later, the family gave him the car to finish. So here's what he did. All of the fabrication, the welding, the engine assembly, exhaust painting was done by Kirk. Matter of fact, the upholstery is the only thing he farmed out. The motor, check this out, is a later model flathead, 3/4 race cam, adjustable lifters, Edelbrock heads, 2 carbs, all the good stuff. Then it's backed by a C4 automatic and a 9-inch Ford. And the paint, of course, is yellow single-stage urethane. Now this car, check it out, man. A flathead in a T-Bucket is just natural, man. He'd look awesome. And look at his exhaust. He's got 3 individual pipes coming out each side, really old school, and flatheads sound awesome that way. And of course, you can't beat a yellow hot rod. So what a great project. So to honor the completion of the Deathbed Promise, Kurt, we're gonna give you a bead roller. This is a manual bead roller from Woodward Fab, and as you can see, it's not only the bead roller, but it's a whole bunch of dies so you can roll beads and cut flanges and do all kinds of stuff. And then we are going to give you a deluxe project planning book. This will allow you to keep track of everything you did on that T-Bucket so you can service it and get years of enjoyment out of it. Then we're going to give you a Gearz fender cover to use however. I know you don't have fenders on the bucket, but you'll find a use for that. Then we're going to give you a Holley gift card so you can pick up some Holley products for your next project. We're also going to give you a gift card from Hot Shot Secret so you can get some of their products and use it in whatever you want. And then we're going to finish it up with a Copperhead die cast. Now, for the rest of you guys, if you want to get in on this and get your project featured on the show, you got to send it to us. Go to our website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit it into What Are You Working On? The website's also the place to find out more information on any products you may have seen on the show, any Gearz merchandise, and how to join Gearz Nation. You can also see Gearz episodes for free on our YouTube channel and become a channel member. That way you get bonus content and you get early access to all the new episodes. Also, don't forget to check us out on Amazon Prime for Gearz and the Gearz Restoration Series. Finally, don't forget to like us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're a radio person, make sure you check out our podcast, Tales of a Gearhead. All right, that wraps it up for us today. Hopefully you have a hankering to get out there and build a hot rod. Kirk's got one going together. We've got one going together. Where is yours? You need to get out there and start working on something. We'll see you next time.